All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Thousand Words Show. Man, it has been a minute or months, I guess, since I've been here. Life kind of gets in the way, work kind of gets in the way. But I'm always like desiring these great conversations. And today I am super excited to have my friend Reid Bryant on. Reid and I crossed paths here in the last few months on a project in Texas together. And the conversations are always kind of what steer this. There happens to be photos that end up being maybe the common part of the conversation, but Reid is an author and a just super talented writer. He's coming to us from Vermont today. He is the endorsed operations
manager.
manager
Yeah,
for the Orvis company. So that's kind of how we cross paths. Welcome, Reid. Super excited to have you on today.
yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, and I love that you do this. I love that you do these conversations because you and I have spoken a lot and talked about stories and storytelling through visual, through photo, through video, through writing, and just what makes a story. And so I love that you're doing this work.
Well, I'm really grateful that we have the chance to talk, but even more grateful that we had the opportunity to kind of cross paths, like I said, down in Texas, on a story for Covey Rise here in the last month or so. Reid and I hopped in a car together, hadn't met until the airport terminal, and hopped in a car and drove for a few hours and stayed overnight.
You got the short end of that one. I think I unloaded. I tend to have a bit of a not much of a filter, and I think I like turned on the faucet, and you got bombarded right out of the gates for about 3 hours of me.
No,
being
it was
like,
great.
"Blah, blah, blah."
We got there right after the unseasonable ice storm that hit Texas, and we kind of skirted all of the weather, but we got in the car, and just like I think probably because we're both storytellers, there was no shortage of conversation to be had the whole way south and into the evening, and eating good authentic Mexican and all of the things. So and I got to eat La Lengua tacos that night.
Yes, those were pretty solid too. And I will say that we also indulged in a couple large format margaritas that I think had antifreeze or something in them. They hurt a little bit going to, like, you remember those what are those things called, those popsicles that we had when we were kids? It was just a plastic tube with frozen squeeze pops, or I forget what they're called.
Absolutely. Totally remember those.
But they always kind of hurt a little bit when you swallowed them. It was kind of a similar foundation for those cocktails we had. So I don't know, for whatever that's worth.
That was full frame. Those were the completely loaded margaritas, and the place, it was as authentic as you're going to get without being on the other side of the border, I think. So and we kind of did the, like, we're ordering, and we were with your friend Trent, and just kind of you guys picked up where we left off, and I dovetailed into and we're ordering, and La Lengua tacos and this, and I'm like, let's all have that too. And I had no idea what La Lengua tacos were. We kind of started eating them, and you and Trent kind of looked at each other, and I'm like, what is La Lengua? And come to find out, it's beef tongue. And
whenever I do, and I'm not a huge tongue fan, I guess I would say, but I always have a weird sense of, like, I'm tasting you, but you're tasting me back, kind of thing, which it's very unsettling. I don't know. Weird.
Well, it was like I said, it was all very authentic. We had a great trip. We were doing some quail hunting with Robert Earl Keen, who is a huge. We were both just a little bit starstruck, but not too bad that we got to hang out with a musical genius, and one of the guys that we both have just a great fondness for his music and his storytelling. So it was really cool to spend that time in the field around camp, playing guitar. I mean, literally, I was kind of on cloud nine as a guitarist and singer too, that I'm just sitting here holding Robert Earl's guitar, or he's playing songs that have kind of been a little bit of the soundtrack of our young adult life. So that was pretty cool.
Absolutely. No, it was a pleasure. And it was really, I feel like we both did a good job not overplaying our fanboy whatever
Yeah.
weakness, but we held it together. I feel like we made a good impression.
Yeah.
So that was good.
Hopefully. Hopefully.
I'm sure we did.
Let's talk a little bit about that trip. I mean, that was, like I said, it was our first time together, working alongside each other. As much as there was the fanboy thing going on, we were kind of on an assignment with a story to tell. The story hasn't been published yet in Covey Rise, and it'll be coming up, but you've given me a chance to read kind of what you wrote. You've seen images that I took. I'm super intrigued with, working alongside just gifted writers and people that have a way of putting onto paper a lot of the things that, you feel when you're, experiencing something in the field or just in life in general. And you sent me kind of your draft of it, and it was just, I read it like over and over and over. And it was like, there were just
Thank you.
certain phrases and things that you said that just absolutely, nailed how I felt at the same time. And talk a little bit. You've worked alongside photographers a fair amount in your journey, but talk about what your process is as you are there and kind of taking in what will eventually have to be put onto paper. Like what's
Mhm.
going through your mind as you're on an assignment like that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I wish I had a cleaner answer for you. I think, well, let me say a couple things. First and foremost, I think working in concert with photographers is always fascinating to me. I've worked with, yeah, I think Brian
Mhm.
Grossenbacher in
Mhm.
particular quite a bit over the years, and other photographers as well. And one of the things that I find, particularly for field photographers, it's a tricky thing for someone like you, and you are very adept at this, is capturing someone in their environment, noting that there's a lot of different forces at play. There's dogs on the ground, there's birds flying over, there's guns, there's vehicles, there's a lot of people. And in fact, in that photo shoot specifically, there were a lot of people. It was almost, I don't, this is not, I don't say this to disparage the experience at all, but, there was a lot of people. There was a lot going on.
Mhm.
So your ability to fade into the background and just to capture what was happening, I think was phenomenal. And I also think that that's the real trick for photographers, is how do you sort of disappear, but also, capture what needs to get captured and position yourself in such a way that
Mhm.
you get the unique view or the unique angle or whatever it is, but have it unfurl naturally. So that was amazing. For me, it's a it boy, this is a really good question because it's something I think a lot about. Every experience is a little bit different. And I'm gonna do a terribly unprofessional thing here, and I'm gonna run and let my dog, who is scratching at the door, in
Perfect.
because he's
Love
gonna
it.
make a
It's
ton of
all
noise.
this is all about the
This
authentic
is real.
nature. Yeah.
This is what it looks
Yeah.
like behind the curtain. Excuse me for one
This is
second.
what Now please welcome to the show. What's the dog's name? Welcome to the show, the dog.
he,
Yeah.
I have this old Springer here, lovely old guy, Wiley, and he has a sad story, but he has a cancer, a tumor in his throat, and he's really having a tough go. So when he wants to come in, he comes in. He does whatever he wants to do
All right,
these
Wiley.
days.
Take it
Yeah.
away. No.
So back to your question. It's always a bit different, but one of the things that I find is that I have a lot of trouble going into a story with a preconceived notion of what it is that I want to say, because I
Mhm.
feel like until you see it happen, until you see the thing that sticks out or you see the subject respond to certain situations in certain ways, you just don't know what you're going to get. So
Yep.
I've never, and maybe this is just how I go about it, but I try to go in just eyes wide open and see
Mhm.
what sticks out. So I had, in that circumstance, I had a sense of the location. Obviously, I had a huge sense and a preconception, I think, of who Robert L. Keane
Right.
was, because I'm such a big fan. Um, and I just tried to be open to asking him enough questions, and also being aware of him in the space to pick up on the subtleties of what makes this guy tick, what resonates with him, what does he get excited about, what lights him
Mhm.
up. And so yeah, it's always a bit different, but I think that that's at the core. What I really try to do is look for that little glimmer of I wouldn't have expected that this person got excited about this, or I wouldn't have
Mm.
expected that this person would have responded in this way to this situation. So, for example, down there, when we got there, the other thing that was really interesting in that trip was that we had being respectful of his time and the nature of him being something of a celebrity. There was some ordained management of his time. So for
Mhm.
example, I reached out prior to that experience and said, "Hey, can I just get an hour with him where I'm just asking questions?" And
Yep.
then of course I had to come up with questions, which is harder to do than just have an organic conversation like
Right.
we're doing now. So how do you kind of lead the witness but not lead them so much that it feels like you're structuring
Mhm.
their feedback, that you have an idea of what you want to convey? So it was really interesting process down there for me, particularly because in that interview that you were privy to, that you, I think, recorded much of and certainly sat in on just because it was fascinating to hear him talk, that was a little bit nervous making and a little bit, it felt a little formulaic. Like I hadn't met him before. I was a little nervous. There was people watching and listening.
Mhm.
I sat down and had these questions and I tried to a get the pertinent information that I needed to get as far as biographical info and get what does hunting mean to him, what was his evolution as a hunter, so on and so forth, which was going to feed the outlet, feed the what Cover Your Eyes wanted and what the
Mhm.
readership wants. Also, I had selfishly had a bunch of questions that I was just like, what does this
Right.
song mean? What
Yeah.
was this about? What was in your head when you wrote this? What do you remember when you said that? And then also didn't want to come across as a weirdo stalker type guy, but I was fascinated just to know the backstory of a lot of these things that again I'd heard his storytelling for so long that I really wanted to know what was in your mind. How did this story come to be? And
Mhm.
how do you do this? And what's your process like? And I think some of that is not that interesting for people that aren't storytellers, but for me to understand how someone is inclined to formulate a story and what their process looks like is just fascinating
Mhm.
because I think that real craftspeople, artists who can do that, I just am fascinated by their process. So that was all part of it. What was interesting on that trip, I think, was that he also is a private person. And I think there was a lot of stimuli and I was respectful. And I think you were very respectful of the fact that this is a guy who gets not a ton of time to go out and do the thing he wants to do
Mhm.
among friends and not be in the spotlight. And yet he was in the spotlight in his quote unquote safe space. So that felt a little bit tricky. And I didn't want to push too hard and I didn't want to be snooping around too much. And there was so there was a few things in the interview process that were illuminating, and then what was more illuminating, honestly, for me was just riding around in the truck. The last day we were there, second day we were there, I just rode around the truck with him,
Mhm.
and he was kind of tired, and I think there was a lot going on, and just listening to him talk. He was in the back seat, I was in the front seat, and just tried to have a conversation. And usually, when I'm doing something like that, I try to record it. Like I'll try
Mhm.
to do a voice memo or
Okay.
something on my phone just so I can remember, so I'm not jotting down notes or whatever. Cause it's just much more, it flows a lot better when you're just having a conversation.
Yep.
And I was unable to record that, but I picked up on a few little bits and pieces in there that I thought were that stood out to me. The thing that I find, sorry, you got me rambling now,
No,
but
this is good.
the thing that I find most um, challenging with a situation like that, and in fact, in a lot of the the time I spend with people that I really am eager to document their story or profile them, is that I don't have the recall that I used to. I just don't remember details the way I used to. And so where I used to say, okay, I'm going to have a conversation, whatever's important is going to stick and I'm going to remember
Mhm.
it. It's kind of like remembering you wake up in the middle of the night and you had a dream and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I'll remember this in the morning. And you're like, what was that about? It's
Yeah.
kind of that similar thing. So there are certainly pieces of that conversation that I've lost, which I just don't grab the way I used to. But, I guess that's just part of getting older, or part of just having too many things rattling around in your brain. But
Yeah. Oh, I
and then
know.
so that was the capture part, and then getting home and turning it into something almost without fail. I don't write when I immediately am done with
Hmm.
an experience. Like I
Yeah.
almost always give it a month, 2 months, maybe just to settle in and
Mhm.
see what rises to the surface. Because usually there will be something that even if I was intrigued by it at the get-go when it transpired, something else will bubble up after I've digested it for a while, and
Yeah.
it'll to me, that's kind of proof of concept in that meant something to me for some reason. It stood out to me what resonated, and usually I can lean into that and write something from that point of resonance.
Yep.
In this situation, for whatever reason, I came home and I really needed to write that story. Like I just had to, and I'm not one that I don't love to write. Like it's a choice. It's hard. Yeah, I love it when it's done.
Says the ultimate, the gifted writer, the
Well,
author, got all these books in it. I really
no,
don't like
I
writing.
really don't. I mean, I hate to say that because I worry what that does kind of manifestation wise. But it's not easy for me, and I think a lot of that is particularly that when I am writing about someone who I have a tremendous amount of respect
Yeah.
for, I have a deep insecurity that whatever I create won't level up to my respect for that
Hmm.
person. And when you're writing about a storyteller and you're trying to tell a story about them, it's kind of the worst version of
Yeah.
that, where you're like, this guy is just so capable of using language and imagery in a small space and turning it into something that thousands and thousands and thousands of people think about all the time.
Right.
How am I going to do justice to that? But this one, I got home and I just wanted to tell the story, and it was interesting because when I did write that piece, and not to get too detailed because I know folks largely haven't, won't have read it for a while, but the 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 first draft was wrong. It just wasn't right, and I knew it wasn't right, and I think I was trying too hard, and I was also finding that I was referencing some of his songwriting, some of his storytelling, but I was inferring too heavily that everyone reading the piece would know
Hmm. Hmm.
his work. And I think that's the other thing that's tricky is you have to make something that's not only going to be digestible and palatable to the super fan, but is going to be interesting to the person that's like, who is this guy? I've
Yeah.
never heard of him. I don't know what.
Yeah. You
So
had to do
anyway,
some level of introduction. It wasn't just some random guy that we went hunting with. Yeah.
yeah. And that was hard, but I think in the end, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think in the end, I just wound up with a piece that I was proud of, that I felt did him justice, that I felt like was done at enough of a level that it was I could be it was enough of a gesture of respect that
Hmm.
I hoped I don't know if he's read it yet. I keep
Yeah.
asking if like, can you proof this and just make sure it's cool? But
Yeah.
but I hope it does justice and is honest and resonant to him, that like, yeah, this is a clear depiction of me. Because that's the other thing that I really sorry, you've really got me going now. But the other thing that he said, and I don't know if you remember this in the conversation we had in the interview, but um actually went into that experience with him. One of my questions was around how he and if he considers his audience. And one of the things that he said, which I thought was so interesting, was he decisively, emphatically was like, "Oh yeah, like I want my
Yeah.
audience to like it. I want it to make sense to them. I want them to." And I kind of assumed that the great artists are like, "I don't care. This is for
Yep.
me. I'm the
Yep.
artist. Like, art for art's sake, whatever. I don't care who listens to this." And he definitely was not saying that. And so that actually, through my process, got me really thinking about that too. Is yeah, I care deeply about what my audience thinks, and I worry about that. And I think it at times is limiting and hamstrings me in the creative process. But it was a bit of a vote of confidence for me to say, okay, well, no, it's okay that I care that this guy is going to read this, and I hope he likes it, and I hope
Yeah.
it
I
makes
remember
him.
him saying that where he said the songs that I write and the people that listen to me perform them, like, I want them to feel good. I want them to be happy. I don't feel like, I mean, exactly what you said. Like he doesn't feel like he has to have this like take it or leave it. This is how I feel. He wants to be the everyman with his audience. I remember him saying that, and I'm like, that's cool. And that's exactly, what his music has been for so many people. It's just it does in the, feeling good again. It's like,
Yeah,
no, that really truly makes you feel that. And that's pretty unique.
I think so, and I think that there. I don't know if you see this with photography and video as much, but I find it challenge for me as a writer to there's a lot of writers out there that I know are brilliant, and yet when I read their work, I don't always understand it, or it doesn't
Yeah.
always. It's just confusing. It's too esoteric or too complex, or the
Mm.
language is too intellectual or just something. And I
Yep.
always feel that that's my fault. Like, oh, I'm not smart enough to understand it. So when I go into writing, I often have this insecurity around. I want to make sure people think I'm smart. I want to make sure people
Right.
think I'm uh, uh, unique in
Mhm.
my voice and my perspective. And sometimes when I lean into that too hard, it just feels like I'm trying really hard. And I
Yeah.
think that that's a real danger for me is that if I go into something really trying aggressively to communicate that, hey, I'm smart, or I'm, look at me taking this
Mhm.
weird angle of
Right.
perspective on this thing, it just comes up, it doesn't work. And I still do it. I still fall victim to that all the
Sure.
time, but there's a lot of I have a lot of insecurity around
Interesting.
all of this stuff. Yeah.
I think it's interesting. You talked about how you typically let these things marinate and you think about them, and they're just kind of spinning around in your head. And how right away when you said that, I'm like, man, I live on the complete other side of that, where there's something there, like the second you press the shutter, like you've got your product to a certain
Hmm.
extent.
Hmm.
And so, for me, I'm thinking about those things. You almost have to, like, preload some of those things, and obviously you have to take into account what's happening around you and what angles are going to do this and what moments do you want to try to capture that will tell the story, but not having the ability to let the final product marinate. But that being said, from a video standpoint, I totally get what you're saying, because I'll shoot, whether it be stories or short films or all of those things. And I might go in, like you said, with a preconceived notion, like I feel like I kind of know what this is, but it takes a lot of times just months for that to kind of materialize in my head. Like, okay, what did we get? What did happen? What did that person say? How is it different than what I thought? And, those things definitely take time. So, how different photography and video is, and how probably similar video is to the written word.
Yeah, and I think that's a great and astute observation. I think one of the things that I find so, and I think there are writers that do this too, but I find so compelling and so admirable about photographers in particular. Again, you being a great example of this, is I think a ton about just in life about intention and conviction. Right.
Mm.
So because I've always struggled since I was a little kid with what what is my level of conviction and what is my level of intention? Do I know exactly where I stand on things? Because I feel a lot of my, just again in life across the board, I'm sort of mushy on things a lot. I'm like, I don't know. Like, was that cool? Did I don't should I, whereas I think and so I get the opportunity to deal with that mushiness as I think about, okay, what do I want to say? Whereas I think someone like yourself in the photography setting, as you just said, you have to know and believe that it's worth pulling the trigger, but clicking the
For sure.
shutter on
Yep,
that.
absolutely.
Um, and so you have to have a degree of confidence and a degree of, again, conviction, which I just find so admirable when particularly creatives or artists can say that's worth capturing right there,
Mhm.
boom, split second in the moment on the fly. Whereas I might miss tons of those things and only later be like, oh, that I should have paid closer attention to
Hmm.
that, but I didn't. And I find that a real, again, going back to this like a therapy session, going back to my insecurities, I don't have a very high degree of confidence in my conviction in the moment. And I
Hmm.
find that really a challenge for me
Yeah.
personally.
Do you feel like you said, you try to record things? That's got to help with that, though, doesn't it? Where it's like, hey, I'm gonna just like we're just gonna hit record and like let her rip and see what comes of this, and then try to process it and stitch it together later.
Yeah, it helps a ton because then I have it all.
Yeah.
Then I can weed through it and I
Yep.
can take my time weeding through it. Or it might even be as simple as regularly, I'll be in that process of recording. I think the other thing that happens when I'm recording or having a conversation, this is a real something I struggle with as well, is that I'm thinking about so many things
Mm.
that I'm not necessarily really listening. Like I'm thinking, okay, is my phone capturing this? Oh, he just said this. Can I turn this into something? Where's this going to go?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the person is just continuing to
Yep.
talk. So when I go back and re-listen, oftentimes I'll hear things that I didn't hear in the moment just
Yeah.
because I think I was distracted by so many
You were
other.
like buffering. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just trying to make that's again why I think something like photography or even like I don't know why this is coming up for me, but even the idea of like debate,
Hmm.
like if in that stage of a debate, like you have to pick up on the things that you're going to comment on really quickly,
Yeah.
and I think that oftentimes I'm just there's so many things swirling around in the moment that I don't allow myself the time or encourage myself to really focus on,
Hmm.
okay, that stuck out. Let's lean in there. Let's really capture that versus just sort of being like, oh,
Right.
there's a
Right.
lot coming over the bow. I don't know.
Well, I think it's, I mean, again, testament to what you're able to do by translating all of those things eventually, not right in the moment, but eventually turning them into something that's on a page that's, for the readership or for whoever your audience is, it resonates with them. They feel like they were there. They feel like they have a connection with the story that you're telling. And I think as creatives, even going into this podcast, you and I are like, nah, we're just going to wing it. Like, we don't have to, there's not this list of questions. And I think as creatives, that's part of what we do is like, you got to just like go with the flow, and you got to be able to juggle a lot of things and process a lot of things and pursue the right thing at the right time. I know as a photographer, yeah, I mean, I have to decide when it's right to press the shutter, but you also you don't want to script it too much. You don't want to direct too much. There's times where you're going to need to say, hey, look over there one more time, or do this one more time, but so much of it, I think what's made me, relatively, efficient at this is just being able to like know that like this is kind of where I probably should be, and this is maybe how things are going to unwind. And yeah, and then when you're quail hunting and you've got dogs and guns and people and shouting and all of the things, it's like then you just kind of shrug your shoulders and go, well, like let's let her rip and see what happens. And um I think you and I both in our unique mediums have the ability to juggle a number of things, and hopefully at the end of it all kind of settles out into something that tells a pretty good story.
Yeah, and I think it's probably one of those things too that the more you do it, the more adept you get at
100%.
noticing what is sticky, what's
Yep.
gonna. Yeah, I think your gut gets more tuned to that.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's funny though, because even in talking, using Robert Elkine as an example, talking to him and hearing him talk about his creative process and how sometimes the songs will just flow out done, basically.
Yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to get at with him that we didn't really touch on. I tried. That was probably too much steering on my behalf. But one of the things that I wanted to hear from him was whether he feels as though it's an active process of crafting a story, building a story, or if it's just something that is sort of channeled through him. I
Hmm.
apologize. My dog here is he's making weird noises. So
Yeah.
it's not me. It's not my belly or anything. I think that there are times, and this is the thing that I find most compelling as a writer, because it doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's the best feeling in the world. That I am almost a channel for a story that I didn't. How would I put this? It's very hard to articulate. There's a book I actually mentioned when we were talking to Robert Keene. This book, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, which is about the creative process, similar in a sense to Rick Rubin wrote that book. It got all the hype for a while. The might have been called The Creative Process. I
Yeah,
forget,
I think
but
I know the one you're talking about,
yeah,
yeah.
but both of them were talking about this idea that sometimes stuff just happens and you
Mhm.
are the vehicle for it coming out, but you don't even know where it came from. And there are times, and again, it's rare, but when it happens, it's amazing that I'll go back and I'll read something that I wrote even years ago, and I'll be like, how did I don't even know where that came from.
Yeah,
Like the
right.
story. I mean, obviously, I know where the story came from because it's referencing experiences I had or talking about thoughts that I had. But the way the language may have transferred from my head onto the page,
Hmm.
I'll be like, I didn't. That that
Where did
was
that come from?
yeah.
Yeah,
I just have no idea, and it's really it does feel magical in a sense. It's like you're just like, wow, that was wild, and that's a very compelling feeling.
yeah. It's, I'm always intrigued with, I mean, obviously here we are, the whole concept of this podcast that I've done is, kind of the story and the words behind, the images, and
Mhm.
you're the one that has the gift for bringing those words in, and you shared a couple photos that we'll talk about here, but are there times where you are with maybe a photographer in the field, and you mentioned Brian, you've spent a lot of time with Brian, and are there times where you're like, man, I hope they got that because I feel like what just happened, if I have a visual to go with my words, will be more powerful?
Nope. And the reason that is because I don't see the thing that I love about photographers is that they see things and what they can. I love looking at photography. Love it, love it, love it. Probably more than I like. I mean, I like reading too, but I love looking at good photos. And typically it's because the way you all see things is so much more defined and refined than the way I see things. So I feel like great photographers can take the most mundane, something that I'll just see as like, oh, that's a passing throwaway moment,
Yep.
and you'll capture it in a way that's like, that was stunning.
Yeah.
And I don't see those things. And so it's always
Interesting.
really interesting to me when I'm writing, if I have, so there's a little more context to this too, but if I get, oftentimes if I'm writing alongside, and we didn't do this, but I think it was just because the whatever impetus I had for, or imperative I had to get this thing written.
Mhm.
But, I usually wait to see the images. Like I usually wait to write till I see the images because
Yeah.
oftentimes things will pop out that like, wow, that was an incredible moment. And I just didn't it to me it just went by. But
Uh-huh.
you may have captured it and I'll be like, wow, that was stunning. And I also think that when writing for magazines that are, stories that are accompanied with photography, there is something really powerful about writing in a sense to a degree, writing to the images
Hmm.
because it makes
Interesting.
them fleshier,
Yeah.
it just makes them more. So I almost never know in the moment. I'm always fascinated to see what the moments are that someone like you
Hmm.
caught because I'm looking at this picture, that beautiful print that you sent me on the wall of Robert Keane playing guitar in front of the fire, and it's an angle that I didn't have. I think I was a little bit drunk and probably wasn't noticing too well, but the way you capture that in the light, and it's just such a beautiful solitary moment of him looking at the fire and playing guitar and just lost in whatever thoughts he was having.
Mhm.
And I I wouldn't have that's not I wouldn't have seen that.
Sure.
And I didn't see it until you
Yeah.
sent that. And I was like, oh, I was sitting there and I didn't see this. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think that there's something with photography that I just find incredibly um the ability of a good photographer to take literally any moment and
Mhm.
any snippet of time or little frame and turn it into something exquisite and really powerful is
Mhm.
amazing to me. Just amazing.
I think that's, I mean, there's a bigger life thing to, like, just perspectives on things. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with, even and you can bring, you're looking at things from different angles, and even your words brought in a whole nother perspective on the experience that we both had together. I listened, aside from some of the, backseat conversation you had with him, like, I took in all the same stuff, and your perspective on it in the written sense was just like, man, that is. I know I heard that, but that is just such a cool way of telling the same story. I think about John Hafner was there with us as well, and
Mhm.
John and I have worked together all over the world, shooting lots of really cool things together. And I think one thing that works well that I'm always kind of amazed with, we don't stand right next to each other and just shoot the same focal length and like, ooh, that was really cool right there. And, you're shooting exactly the same thing. A lot of times we'll work at, 90 degrees to each other or different focal lengths. And you are completely capturing or experiencing the same story, but having different perspectives on it.
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
you can have the, two different camera perspectives, two different focal lengths looking at things. And then you throw in, like you said, that, the written word brings in a whole nother perspective of that. That's like, I think as creatives, as artists, like this is kind of cool that we're able to share the same thing from so many different angles.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the
The
gift of
one
it, right?
photo you shared, it's one of Brian's, it's a guy with a kinda standing,
Yeah.
up to his
I love
knees
that photo.
in the
Yeah, yeah.
water with, with a boat kind of in his hand.
Yeah.
I always love looking at images. You can we spend our world, scrolling Instagram, and it's like, you can just look at images, obviously. Sometimes you maybe read a caption and it gives you a little bit more insight, but my brain always just like, I love I wonder what the story is kind of thing. And this is one of those that, yeah, I mean, is super intriguing. The guy is looking, off to the side at something, and he's got this, it's sort of this ominous day. Like, tell me the story of what's going on with this photo that Brian took.
Yeah, so I saw that Brian did a series of photos for Sims Fly Fishing years ago that were kind of guide, portraits, if you will. And I believe that was part of that series. And so this is a guy, Lincoln Westby, is a guy down in Belize, permit guide, and probably one of the greatest. I mean, it's always tricky to say that, but arguably one of the greatest permit guides ever. And
Mhm.
older fella. And I remember seeing this photo and I just loved it. And I couldn't really figure out why. So he's standing there. He's an older fella. He's not fancy looking in any way, just a kind of crusty old guy. And he's holding his boat, and his boat says permit on it, which I just think is funny. Like, I don't know why, but, there was something about that image that I just thought was really beautiful in that it wasn't, I think what I really liked about it was it didn't have any of that bro-y fly fishing
Hmm.
thing to it.
Mhm.
It was just a guy that clearly had was in his element and just seemed very native of that place, but also seemed, and again, I don't know exactly the circumstance when that photo was taken, but it seems like he's just in the middle of nowhere and he's alone. And
Yeah.
he's just sort of comfortable in the middle of nowhere alone,
Hmm.
standing in the water, just part of that space. Years later, I got a chance to fish with Lincoln and just have a ton of respect for him as an individual. And I think that what somewhere in that photo, what it says to me is, although he's, again, arguably the greatest at his craft
Mhm.
and renowned by people that are very knowledgeable and experienced and good, he just doesn't seem to care about it's not a he just, there's something in that photo that just says like, I'm not, this is just what I do.
Yeah.
Like, this is, and I don't need to celebrate myself, and I don't need to look a certain way to make you think I'm cool, and I
Yep.
don't need,
Yep.
he's just a guy who like is so just in his body and in his place that I don't know. I just love that. Again, it comes, I think a lot about confidence, and I think a lot about when people, when people are just in themselves, you can kind of sense that they're
Mhm.
just, there's a level of, I don't care what anyone thinks. It's just me
Right.
doing my thing.
Yeah. It's
And
not
I
gonna be
think,
the Sims catalog cover per se, but it's got an authenticity to it that's just like kind of a, yeah, like take it or leave it, but like this is as real as it gets.
yeah, this is, and I don't care if you know who I am. And I didn't, when I first saw
Yeah.
it, I didn't know who it was. And I've since again got to know that. And I think the other thing for me is that as when I did meet him, and he so impressed me just as an individual in a very quiet way and
Mhm.
unassuming way. it just cemented that. For there's something about that photo, I just love it. I
Yeah.
don't know, I can't really put a finger on what it is, but it just speaks volumes to me, and it's just a beautiful. I just love the color. I love the lighting. Like it's just a stunning,
Hmm.
very stunning. It's terrible
Yeah.
from a writer, but it's a stunning image. Yeah,
Yeah. You sent one other photo, that
yes,
I'm
I love
guessing
this one.
wasn't taken on digital. Looks like a couple, from
Yeah, yeah,
early '80s, late '70s on a kinda hanging out by an old Ford pickup truck.
yep. I gotta get you the here we go. That original photo was taken by a guy named Mike Warren in Yak, Montana in 1990. And there's a that one. So it's funny actually having this conversation because I've had this idea for a long time um that I haven't acted upon because I feel like it'll come across as weird if I were to act upon it. But there's a number of people in my life that I care deeply for who have just been important people in my life. And I can probably name, I don't know, 5 to 8 of these people who there are photos of them that I've seen in their
Mhm.
lives or in their homes or whatever that I would love to have a collection of those photos just
Hmm.
because those people have been so meaningful to me. And this one really speaks to that. So that's a picture of Tim and Joanne Lenahan, who own Lenahan Outfitting up in Yak, Montana, in the northwest corner of the state, who've just become great friends. And I love them as people and I love them as friends. And that picture hangs on their wall. And what I love about it is that I think you and I talked about Yak a little bit.
Yep.
It's a very rural, very removed part of Montana that doesn't have a lot of glitz and glamour. They moved up there not long after college as a young couple. Tim started guiding. He was en route to Bozeman and wound up sort of getting stuck in Yak
Mhm.
and stayed there. Joanne came out. And they're both from Joanne grew up in Florida, but was living in New Hampshire. Tim's from New Hampshire. They went west to have the big adventure, and they wound up building this incredible business and being these incredible people. Again, just really resilient, but in a
Mhm.
very genuine, welcoming, kind, gentle way. And that photo of them when they're young, I love it because they were so young and
Yeah.
they were so like I love Joanne's wearing like acid wash jeans and like a like tree towards she's like
Yep.
this beautiful 1980s girl from New Hampshire and she's like sitting on this beat up truck and yet where they are at the time and Tim similarly is like wearing a jean jacket and just like not they're not like Western
Right.
they don't have that like rugged tough as nails thing. They're just these innocent kids that are in this what I know to be an incredibly rural, cut off, hard scrabble place.
Hmm.
And they made it,
Yeah.
they like made it and they stayed out there and so there's something in that that's much more, it's less about the photo and more about what the photo captures for
Yeah.
me is like these people who I am inspired by, who I care deeply for, who've been incredibly kind to me. And I think just seeing them at the beginning of this journey that now I can see them so far along in that
Yeah.
journey and just thinking back on like what was going through their heads like
Hmm.
what and how did this guy even almost in a sense of why was there even a real photographer out there
Right. Right.
who thought to like hey we should take a photo like I don't it doesn't make I'm sure there's more of a story to it and I'm sure I've heard it and I've forgotten but just that moment that gets captured of them
Yeah.
knowing them now just
Kinda
there's
just
something
head
there.
full of dreams and, like, you think about what's transpired since it would be cool to go back and not recreate that exact photo in that exact place, but to capture a portrait of them again now with, you know, the signs of all of those stories, visually, they look different and
Yeah,
they've their hard drives are full of stories now that
right.
we're only waiting to be told in this photo.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's something there too that it's reminiscent for me of probably an idealism I had when I was about the same age that I
Hmm.
never would have acted upon.
Hmm.
Like that they, I think I remember, I know, I don't have to think that there were pieces of me that would have said when I was 22 or 23 or however old they are in that picture, like, oh yeah, I want to go west and live out in the wilds and go fishing and hunting and be a mountain man kind of
Yeah.
thing. And And I think even as I was saying those things, I knew that I didn't have the wherewithal to actually do it. I just
Right.
didn't I wasn't built that way, and they were and
Hmm.
did, but I think there was less. I think that and it's evidence in that photo. I think there's less of a uh I think in a lot of ways I wanted to do that so people
Hmm.
would see me having done it and be like,
Yeah.
"Wow, what a cool badass guy who went out and did this cool thing." I
Yeah.
think they're just like, "We're just we landed here.
Yeah.
I guess this is what we're doing now."
Yep.
You know, I don't think there was any compulsion for them to be seen doing it.
Yeah.
And I think that
Pre-social media, like
yeah, there was
now,
not
not to say that couple, but that profile of couple, they've got a YouTube channel and they're influencers and they have an Instagram story that's telling every single thing that they do. These guys just kind of
mm.
went and did it. Like,
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, that picture hangs on the wall in their house, and it's like, you don't I mean, I guess they've put it on Instagram just 'cause for some reason they put it on Instagram at
sure.
some point, but like you know, just in a conversational like retro, "Hey, look at us back when," you know,
Yeah.
but I love that also they have that picture on the wall of their home as just like, yeah, this was us. Like this
Hmm.
is where we were, and this is where we are now, and look, we're still
Yeah.
here. And there's something I'm not putting my finger exactly on what's powerful to me about the whole idea behind that photo and the fact that it's lasted and the fact that it's still
Yeah.
prominent in their home. But there's something there that's just really
Well,
interesting to
you
me.
said it there. Those people mean a lot to you and there's a little something of yourself that you have an affinity with, God, that could have been me or that, I would have loved to have been in that same place. I mean, that's I think
Mhm.
with good art that, we have there's got to be something that pulls at our heartstrings with it, whether
Mhm.
it's a desire to feel the same or, it's not just like, hey, this looks great, I'll double tap it and swipe to the next photo, but the most meaningful ones are the ones that do truly like pull something, from a personal level, which
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
yeah.
No, definitely.
What we only got a couple more minutes here, but talk a little bit about like do you ever have, and we've visited about this, like the one like Shangri-La, like someday, and maybe this is a good transition from that photo.
Right, right.
Someday I would really like to go here, tell this story. I'm super intrigued with it. It's always been kind of like, waiting for the right opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that um, I really enjoy doing these profiles of people because I'm
Hmm.
fascinated by people and what makes them tick and who they really are, particularly people with some degree of public persona or
Yep.
people that have achieved a certain level of mastery of a certain craft. I love digging in, getting a sense of who's behind the curtain and what
Hmm.
makes them what they are and what drives them and so on and so forth. So there's a few of those. There's percolating, potential story with a couple other musicians that
Hmm.
you and I have spoken about. I don't want to tease too much there,
Yep.
but I think from a standpoint of like an adventure story or a story of a a thing I would like to do that I feel like hasn't been exposed. The one that keeps coming up for me is there's a friend of mine, Rance Rathy, who owns he and his partner, Travis Smith, own a place called Patagonia River Guides down in they're based in Trevelin, Patagonian or Argentine Patagonia, but they have a big operation, largely fishing, some hunting down there. And there's a trip that Rance talks about doing bird hunting through the Andes, basically, for this one species of, or yes, well, yeah, I guess species of bird or the tinamou, the
Hmm.
perdiz, the people hunt down there, upland bird, and there's multiple different subspecies of perdiz, or I guess it would be what comes like genus and species, so it's like genus but different species or
Sure.
whatever the breakdown is, texts
Kingdom,
anomically.
phylum, class, order, family, genus,
Yeah,
species.
exactly. So I was trying to go through. Um, so anyway, it would be like a road trip through
Yep.
rural Argentina,
Hmm.
hunting with dogs that would somehow be down there, and we have some friends that have dogs down there. So that for the epic adventure, that would be
Yeah.
it for sure. There's things that I personally want to do, but from a storytelling standpoint, I love the idea of traveling through a rural place that's got a lot of majesty and just visual impact from a landscape perspective,
Mm.
and doing something that nobody does there, and just being the oddball, like, who are these guys? What are they doing?
Right,
Like, this is
right.
so weird, and I think that doing that in a faraway place, in a culture that's foreign to me, there's just
Mm.
a lot of mystery to that's
Yeah.
really compelling. But honestly, I think the thing that's the most motivating for me and most exciting for me is to tell these stories about people.
Hmm.
I
Yep.
like seeing people in their element. I like seeing people that have some weird backstory or some weird context to who they are and what they are and why they do what
Yeah.
they do. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like if you scratch beneath the surface, everyone's got a really cool story to tell and reveal of themselves. And when you get
Mhm.
someone that's willing to reveal it, or if you get them in a moment where they're able to expose what's inside, like, you can
Yeah.
really do a lot.
And
So
I think that, kind of landing the plane here, like, that's the minute you and I got in a car together and started driving, that was like, I could tell that you were one of those just super interesting characters that had a lot of stories and had, just we ping pong back and forth for several days of just like, I found just so much intrigue with the things that you've done, the places you've been, the gift that you have for writing, and I think that's ultimately, like, life is about relationships with people, and you have a great appreciation for that, and a great gift for being able to, speak to and write about those relationships and those, obviously those stories of people. So
yeah,
that's
thank you. I really appreciate you saying that, and I'm just really interested in people. Like, I
Mhm.
like hearing people tell their stories, and I love stories.
Yeah.
But I also want to say, and this is a thanks to you and your craft, is that the as I said before, it's amazing to me when people can capture an awful lot in a very small space. Like, I feel like with writing in longer form, you have a lot of room to flesh something out, and
Yeah.
there's a lot less boundaries. But when it comes to photography, when it comes to video, even when it comes to songwriting is a great example.
Mhm.
When you can convey something so big in such a small space, it's just like,
Yeah.
that's amazing to me that
Yeah.
people can do that. I don't know how you do it. So thank you
Cool.
for being able to
Well,
share that with
I
us.
think I think we, in our own unique ways, have the ability to do that, which I hope continues to resonate with people, in unique ways. And Reid's got, I'll make sure and link him, but Reid hosts the Orvis podcast, which is more conversations like we had today, but he has an ability to just pull things out of people and tell stories and have conversations that are meaningful and thoughtful. So that's another place to check out more. And then obviously you've got, that your some several books and continued
Yeah,
writing and publications and
best place if everyone or if everyone if everyone wants to learn more about me. Yeah, that was weird that I just said that. If anyone does want to dig in a little more, best place, and it's not totally up to date right now, but I have a website, reidbryant.com, reidbryant.com, and that's where everything, the hub
sure.
where everything lives. So you can find podcasts,
Yeah.
some videos, some writing stuff there. So
Awesome. Well,
yeah.
I appreciate obviously the time today. Even more so appreciate just the friendship that we have and the ability to, tell stories together. And I hope we've got some opportunities down the road where we get to kind of go do what we did again, with more interesting people and just cool people that we get to meet and help tell their stories together. So I appreciate you coming on today, and hope we can do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's been a gift, a real gift getting to know you, and I really look forward to doing more adventures and more projects. And I wish I had a little more time today because I could have kept rambling for
Yeah, no, I
another
think
hour.
that's maybe to a fault for both of us. That's something that we do well, is we can just kind of keep going. But we will land the plane here on Thousand Words with this episode with Reid Bryant. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you again down the road.
Thanks so much.
Awesome.
Cool.
Cool.